Good morning, everyone. Hello. Welcome back to Adobe Live. My name is VooDoo Val, and I'm going to be your host this morning for an awesome illustration and painting segment with my good friend Sam Peterson. How are you, Sam?
Doing really well. How about you?
Doing pretty good. I'm very excited to see what you have planned for us today and how things are gonna go. We've got some awesome artwork behind us so you folks can see all of the super cool stuff that Sam does. And we're gonna do like a little maybe intro to what Sam has planned and who he is. But before we jump into that, I'd like to give a huge shout out to Mr. Paul Tranny, who was on just before us. Thank you so much for that epic segment. I really loved the whole journey to Photoshop, little Lord of the Rings map kind of thing you had going on. That was very exciting. And I'd also like to jump into the schedule just to give you folks in chat a little insight into what we've had going on the stream already this morning, what you can expect for the rest of the day, and also what we will have planned for tomorrow. So let me jump over here. We had Getting Started in Drawing with Victoria Pavlov early this morning at about 7:30 a.m. Pacific time, followed by the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge with Paul Tranny, as you just saw. I am here with Sam Peterson for Character Design now at 9:30, and then right after us, we are going to have Julia Masalska, our good friend, with the Illustrator Daily Creative Challenge. Adobe XD Design System segment is coming up after that with Kevin Lee, who we love very much, who is hilarious and wonderful, followed by Peter Del Tondo with the Adobe XD Daily Creative Challenge, and then we're going to be rounding out the day with Kathleen Martin, who is doing the Sketch Party. So you can kind of see what's coming up next, and then also this will be our schedule for tomorrow as well. So if you miss something, you can always come back and watch the VODs, or if you would like to catch the second half of one of our segments, they will be live at the same times tomorrow. Also, I'd like to let all of you folks know, if you're over watching on YouTube, please come over to behance.net/live, because that is where Sam and I are going to be reading your comments and the chat and everything. It's a party over here, so if you're wondering why maybe you've been typing in the chat and you're not getting any answers from us or any shout outs, that would be the reason. We will only be able to see your chatting over on Behance. Love your earrings, Val. Oh, thank you, Cody. I appreciate it. We got Mensa in the chat. Sam Peterson also in the chat. So we got a little dual Sam action going on here. Jennifer Poole, Valder, Malik. Welcome, everyone. Thank you, folks, so much for being here. I'm going to pop over to our stream area here. And then I'm going to kind of pass things over to you, Sam, and let you introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about you and what you do and what you've got planned for today and tomorrow.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Hello, good to see everyone in chat. A lot of familiar faces. So today, what I'm going to be working on is a little bit of character design, but with a focus on the fundamentals of how I paint and draw, how I simplify things into basic forms, both for drawing and painting, drawing out primitive shapes, essentially cubes, cylinders, all that stuff, and how I try to think of values in a way that's kind of quick and hopefully simplified in a way that makes sense. I think this stuff can be really complicated, and I like to try to take what's very complex in a lot of ways and just simplify it down to its core assets. So that's what I'm going to be doing, but I'm going to be doing it through character design. And
Awesome.
if anyone doesn't know who I am, you can check out my Behance, of course. And this is it right here. So if you're not familiar with any of my work, I do a lot of fantasy characters, fantasy creatures, illustration, concept art, that kind of thing. And you can kind of see some of the work I've done over I don't know, this actually goes back a year or so, but my style's been evolving too, so the stuff up here is a bit more recent. But you can check that out here on Behance. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter. Those are the social medias aside from Behance that I'm probably most active on.
Yeah, I've got your Instagram up here, and it's instagram.com/Sam Peterson Art over on Instagram, and then on Twitter, it's also at Sam Peterson Art. So you guys can check out that. I have to say, Sam, I absolutely love your Twitter banner. That's
Oh.
just like the one hit single, hit it
Yeah.
with some rim light. This is excellent. It's
Yeah,
beautiful.
that was for one of the daily creative challenges, and I couldn't help myself with a couple of them because they seemed so fun, and I had like a little extra time, so
Mm-hmm.
that was a good one. I was
Uh,
pretty proud of it, if I'm gonna be
I'm
honest.
into it. I'm super into it, and it's so like because you're such a like a fun, pleasant guy, but you look so serious in this image of you, just like very, very serious about your music, very serious about that
Yeah,
room light.
I can get pretty real, when I'm doing my MC career, I'm
Oh
all
yeah,
business.
I
So
totally understand. And I believe in your career. I believe in it wholeheartedly.
thank you. Appreciate that. I couldn't do without you, Val.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, Sean is like rim light. Yes, everybody's loving the album cover. Yeah, it's very inspiring.
Yeah, I have to sing about what I'm passionate about. So rim light and all that kind of stuff. It just
Smudge
comes
brush,
naturally.
smudge tool, you know.
Yeah,
Oh yeah.
exactly.
All right, well, I'm gonna flip back over to your screen here so we can see your art,
Cool.
and maybe we can just jump in and get started and let us know what your first steps are.
Sounds good. So I've been doing a lot of character design. I mean, recently, but in general, I did want to show you a couple things, everybody here, that I haven't posted on my social media, but you'll probably be seeing it this week. So if you follow me on any of those, you'll see these. But this was the last commission I did. It was a series of 4 D&D characters. This was the Bard. And this is just so you can kind of get an idea of what my more recent finished work looks like.
Mm-hmm.
Today, we're going to be doing things a little bit more loosely, just a little bit more sketchy, kind of having fun. There's not a super planned, finished character I'm trying to get by the end of these streams, but I wanted to do a more free form talking about my methods, talking about how I think about it, and hopefully simplifying, like I said, a complex subject. But just so you know, these is the last few ones I did, which you'll be seeing on my Behance this week and my Instagram and all that good stuff.
Oh, I love that armor, that green. Oh, that's so cool.
Oh yeah. Yeah, that was fun. The description was influenced by a certain World of Warcraft armor set. I forget what it's called, but
Gotcha.
that was kind of a fun little challenge.
Also, Cornell is asking what graphics tablet or graphics screen you are using.
So right now and for a while, I've just been using an Intuos Medium. It's not an Intuos Pro. It's just a regular Intuos Medium. I have a Cintiq. Before the whole quarantine situation, something happened to it. Something blew in it. It's really old, and I gave it to my friend because he's a genius with that stuff, and he fixed it. I just haven't picked it up since. But I've been using this Intuos, and honestly, like, kind of like it just as much, if not like a little bit more. So I've been in no hurry, so I've been sticking with this.
That's really interesting to hear somebody going, because usually you hear somebody going from like a regular tablet to Cintiq, but going like the other way around is interesting, and also that
Yeah.
you're just as comfortable kind of using it is very cool.
Yeah, and I have an iPad too, and there is something to be said for sure about having a screen tablet, especially if you're doing line work, because it's just so natural. It's really bridging that gap, that the disconnect that there typically is with tablets.
Mm-hmm.
But I just draw differently on the Intuos. I feel like it's looser in a way. It's loose in a different way, but I think it's like whichever one you use, you get used to. So I like both of them equally.
Gotcha.
And I just wanted to point out one last thing. This is a little bit closer to what you'll be seeing. The last few pieces I just showed you were finished pieces that I spent quite some time on. These are concepts from a personal project that I'm working on. I'm working on this world building project. I have a lot of ideas for it. It's very ambitious. Eventually, I want it to be this interactive map of lore and legends, so you can click around on this map and discover all the characters and creatures and everything that live in that world. But I've been doing this on my Behance stream actually, and it's just quick concepting. So these are like some of the creatures and people that might live in this world. So this kind of sketchy style, this kind of free-form doodling is a little bit what we're going to be covering today, and I'm going to jump into that now.
Nice. It looks like Ted is asking, how many hours does it typically take you to complete one of your paintings?
So the finished ones probably took around 15. I did struggle with those a bit in the end. It was a learning experience for sure.
Mm-hmm.
I realized I slowed down significantly towards that last 30%, 40%.
That home stretch.
Yeah, and it's that rendering that just takes forever. This took very little time. I could actually check my Behance stream
Mm-hmm.
and see, but you can see how loose it is. Like these brush strokes are very non-detailed. So this probably took an hour or two.
Mm-hmm.
Um, this probably took a few hours since I was really struggling with the rock texture, so I gathered a bunch of references and that kind of thing. So it varies a bit, but finished characters could definitely be 15 hours, maybe even more.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I'd like them to be 10 to 12, but they can get really quick if they're loose sketches like this.
You're the character that was looser, that has like that staff with the blue in it. What do you call that? Does he have a name?
This guy?
No, the other dude, the little
Oh,
dude.
this,
Yeah.
this. What do I call like the creature?
Yeah.
The creature I had in mind for this, I'm calling them. It's all temporary names, but I'm calling them the Bolin. They're
Mm-hmm.
these little people that live underground in like a series of caves, like really big caves and everything. But I imagine that they live among a world of bioluminescence. So there's like organic material growing in the cave that glows, and that's what he put into his little lantern here.
Nice.
Um, so there's like a lot to explore because I start off with an idea like that. Like, what if there's these little people that live underground? Well, would their eyes be big? So that's why I
Mm-hmm.
kind of went these big eyes, like, because a lot of times those nocturnal creatures have large eyes like that, and
I like
you
the
know,
like the goat pupils kind of like is
yeah.
very very interesting. I really love this too because you have like you said, it's more loose, and you have like
Hmm.
larger paint strokes kind of in there. But it seems like even though it was looser than some of your more like 100% finished paintings, all of those strokes feel very deliberate. So you really paid attention to like where you're going with the light, where you're going with the putting those different muscles in there and everything with minimal strokes. Um,
Hmm.
and I think that's kind of good to pay attention to because while some of us maybe at the beginning of diving into painting and things might just go on and get really focused on like the line art and get really focused on maybe doing small details really really soon, you seem to kind of have it down where you can put those defining features and those important strokes in there, so you kind of have everything reading really well right from the get-go. um,
Yeah, for sure. And that's my ultimate goal. That's something I've been really focused on lately,
mhm,
is not spending any more time on things than necessary. If you can establish, and actually that's what we're going to be talking about largely today, but if you can establish a leg, let's say the person's upper leg, in one brush stroke instead of 20,
mhm.
why not do it,
Yeah.
So each brush stroke I'm making, my goal is to establish like the highest percentage of information I can. So if I can knock out a leg in 3 brush strokes, I'm going to do it, It's basically, I mean, it comes with time and experience. Like, you can't do something fast if you can't do it at all. Like,
Mhm.
if you don't even really know how to draw or paint ahead, it's going to be incredibly difficult to do it in a timely manner. So you have to basically get, what is this saying? It's something like you get good, then fast, then good
Mhm.
and fast. So it's kind of one step at a time, but that's definitely where I'm headed. That's my goal. And this one took a little bit longer because you have to have that confidence and understanding. Like, you have to know how to do it from the get-go. If you're figuring out how to paint rock for the first time, you're not really going to be able to do it quickly. So this one took a little bit longer, just because I realized I don't think I've painted rock as much as I've painted, skin, for example.
Mhm. I haven't painted like rock creatures as much as you've painted like buff warrior chests. That's like
Yeah,
that's like for
exactly.
me, like that's like a signature of yours that I could look if somebody gave me like 1,000 crops of like characters that are like ripped barbarian dudes, I would be able to pick out Sam's paintings every single time because it's so distinct. I would know.
Yeah. Yeah, I got my signature shirtless buff dudes. Which, gotta that's the I guess that's the starting point. Those are my roots, and then
This is your go-to.
you just expand from there. Learn how to paint. At some point, I was like, I have to learn how to paint costumes, and now I got to learn how to paint this, and it just your toolbox just grows and grows.
Yeah, and I've been doing that a lot myself lately. I think it's something that probably everyone can in chat can really relate to. Like when you start doing art, I think a lot of us kind of want to do like everything all at once, but we really do have like small specific things that we enjoy painting the most and that we paint the best out of all of the things that we're sort of learning. And you
Mhm.
kind of develop like a repertoire of like, or like a mental database of reference as you go and improve as you go. But you have those things like painting a chest really well. And then once you get that down and you start doing that, accurately, then maybe you start moving into, like you said, painting more costumes so that the characters are wearing more, and you kind of like start going down a list and like checking things off, even if that list is not specific, you know,
For
and you
sure,
just
yeah.
develop your style. It
It's
looks
just
like.
always,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's just always like branching out to that next thing. You find a weakness and you're like, oh, I want to get better at that. Or I'm making these characters, but I'm really not good at like their faces or their hands or their costumes. There's always a weak point that you want to improve at. So you
Hmm.
kind of identify what that is and then study it, and target it, and you just keep growing and getting better.
Yeah. Daniel says, do you typically paint in grayscale to establish values and then colorize, or do you jump right in with base colors and build up?
Right in with colors, I used to do grayscale. I think if you're not confident with your values, getting a sense of form just with black and white, I think that's not a bad place to start. But for me, I like establishing color palettes. So with this one, I don't know if I have a looser version, but a lot of times you can see this really, no, you can't really see it here, but I almost just try to get a color palette. You can kind of see it's almost a little abstract.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll scribble in some colors and then some defining lines, but the color is so much of the feeling for me, like the mood and the personality of an illustration or character. So I really like getting color off the bat. It just feels more natural to me. But my workflow has changed 500 times over the years. So,
Yep.
I would say there's no best way. It really, for me, I always have a specific workflow depending on a problem I'm trying to solve. So if I'm struggling with something and I'm like, you know what, maybe if I approached it this way, that would make more sense. And that's how I've done it for years. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. And when it
Mm-hmm.
does, it's kind of something that finds its way into your workflow.
Yeah, and it's always interesting to me how things
Mm.
come to settle comfortably in my workflow and in the workflows of others, because you're right, you really do kind of like look and see, hey, maybe I'm not doing this as accurately as I could, or you just recognize something that you maybe struggle with every time. Um, and I found that sometimes watching other people paint a certain way, like watching you, for instance, kind of go through all these sketches right now, maybe gives me an idea of how I can approach a sketch the next time I'm working myself. And sometimes that works, and sometimes you try a lot of different techniques and you kind of find what maybe doesn't work for you, which I find to still be as valuable as adding a new tool to your repertoire,
Hmm.
and I would say, like, because I know that we have like a lot of kind of beginner illustrators and painters out there, I would say like trying as many new techniques as you can, like setting aside time specifically for kind of diving into maybe testing out another person's process, or if you make a list of the things that you struggle with in your work and try a new technique for each one of those things. I found that that really helps me kind of improve and increase my speed when it comes to painting, and I find that it helps me feel more comfortable, and get a little bit better at painting those things where when I sit down I'm just like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah,
That typically
definitely.
helps. How much
And
time do you spend researching things like costumes and other references before getting going? This from Judy Bellingham.
it's a good question. So typically what I try to do is get whatever's in my head out onto paper. And a good example of this would be the sketch sheet I did for this world building project that I'm doing. Let me
Mm-hmm.
pop that up. So it's almost like I take notes on so many things, like, actual text document notes when I'm trying to keep thoughts and lists organized. I do the same thing visually, where if I have all these creatures in mind for a project, I have to kind of jot them down even if they're super loose. So there's a little sketch sheet for each one of these figures but you can see how loose some of these preliminary drawings were. I'm like,
Yeah,
oh, what if
wow.
these creatures, look like this? And it's
Mm-hmm.
just a quick idea. Maybe if someone else saw some of these, they wouldn't really know, but it's just so I remember it. And then I've been expanding on. So basically, this guy right here, he turned into that, and think I think I forgot the original question. How much time do you spend research? Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
So I try to get the initial idea out first, and then once I run into trouble, once I realize like, oh, I'm kind of stuck on this, I'll look up a reference for it. So I'll try to inform my original idea. And of course, while you're doing that, you see new influences, you see new things, and that kind of works in too. But I try to get my initial idea out and then just brainstorm and inform it from there with references and other things.
Nice, nice. Yeah, I typically have like massive Pinterest boards like based around certain genres or certain, like I have one dedicated only to fabric and one
Yeah.
dedicated like only to male or female armor and stuff like that. And then I think like the more you put into practicing like painting, the better. Like I still think that even when you're like a professional working in the industry, that you should still have reference up whenever you're working, just to kind of keep your eye on the ball and keep things as like as factual as you can, even if you're doing like fantasy work. But
Yeah.
the more practice you put in and the more research you do put into beginning certain projects, I think the more vast and like the wider breadth you kind of have when it comes to like, where do I go from here? You have more to draw on and more experience to pull from when you go into a project.
Yeah, definitely. That continued building of your visual library is really important.
Yeah.
And one thing I just wanted to talk about here, I really do want to talk about simplification. I think we can get into that now. But when I draw heads, for example, you can see I'm just kind of these are really rough, but this is how all my heads start. I like to draw rectangular cubes for heads.
Mm-hmm.
If you're familiar with Andrew Loomis, those in chat might know that technique. It's like a sphere and then a center line. And you kind of draw the jaw down, but it's like you try all these different methods that you see from books and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And the goal of all of them is to simplify. So the human body, I mean, that's primarily what I do, but this, it's applicable for anything. It's extremely complex, and the only way to really make sense of it is to simplify.
Mm-hmm.
So after doing enough different methods, when I was first learning, I kind of developed my own. But for heads, I like drawing little cubes like that. So if you can draw a cube in space, you're in a good position. And I'm not saying you have to draw heads with cubes, but the ability to visualize these basic shapes in space in any angle you want, like without having to plot out the perspective, specifically. You need to kind of know how perspective works to be able to do that, to be able to kind of freestyle it. But if you're able to just tilt cubes in different angles, or primitive shapes, you're going to be in a pretty good spot. And actually, with that last document, I think I did a little demo with that, and you can kind of see I was showing how I break down the human figure here into basic shapes. Same thing with the hand. So hands are really complex, but you got the palm, you got the fingers that are kind of, when they're together. You got the little like thumb, which is this sort of dome-ish ball thing that's like sticking off the side, and then you got the thumb attached to that, which is just a cylinder. And then a lot of times I think of the wrist, you can think of it as a cylinder or even like a cube. Like if you're trying to do it in perspective, you can think of the wrist like that.
Nice.
The way it attaches to the hand. But you can kind of see here, I'll do this like in perspective. The palm kind of looks like this little cube shape. Maybe you're seeing the side of it a little bit there. The fingers attach here, so you can keep that in mind. And I like to gesture things out with like stick figures first, so I'll do that with fingers a lot. But taking these shapes and simplifying them, I think is really important. And this is what I do for figures. So these figures here, we can start one. But essentially what I do is I always start with the rib cage. And again, that's just me. I've developed my own like sort of method. So for the rib cage, I do these sort of egg-shaped cylinders. That's probably too elongated, but And then the hips, I like to do just basic boxes. And I just go from there, so we can attach the neck, which is a cylinder, the head, which is, it's either this kind of egg shape that I do, or the rectangular cubes that we just talked about. Collarbone, I just put this line across that basically leads to the joints of the shoulders.
Mm-hmm.
So these are kind of a combination of simplifying the shapes and the structure of the skeleton, along with simplifying the shapes and the structure of the human form. So I start with a sort of skeleton like this, just stick figures. I always call these advanced stick figures. You can do stick figures and then just make them 3D. You're in a pretty good position to drawing the figure.
Nice, nice. You got that in there really quick too, and it's very anatomically sound. Just with how you, but again, that kind of goes back to like you can do this because right off the bat, like all of your strokes and everything that you're adding to this stick figure form here are very deliberate and they have a purpose. And that's just like personally for me, that's something that I really had to work at, because I would go to sketch and I would be like sketching all over and adding tons of things all around. But not all of them had a purpose. I just like would draw like the basic shape and just keep adding and adding and adding, and then my sketches would get so messy that I wouldn't actually know which stroke was the one that was kind of like correct as far as anatomy goes. But this, I see here, you're really plotting out, and all of the lines that you really have really mean something. So that's I guess that's good to keep in mind for anybody watching, and then also good to keep in mind just for myself, kind of being able to watch you work and learn from you.
Yeah, and for me, it's like I try to get everything blocked in before I detail anything, and you can see that with these characters here in the center. They're super loose, but it gives me a good overall base to build on top of. I'm like, okay, the face is not established on this guy at all. Let's start figuring out the structure. But even then, I stay zoomed out. Like, I'm not going to zoom in like this and start working on his eye. I'm going to look at it as a very small basic shape. And, that's kind of my, I guess, overarching lesson here is just simplified shapes, simplify everything. Big shapes first, details last. And from here, I can kind of start. Let's get this arm a little bit more. Let's say he's holding a staff, right? So I can kind of stick figure that in. But the key thing here, like I was saying with 3D shapes, and we'll get into this in a moment in value, not just drawing, but this arm here is, kind of a cylinder. And this upper arm, same thing. And I like doing form lines to indicate, all right, well, which shape, which direction and space is this arm going? Is it away from us? Is it towards us? Is it up? Is it down? All that stuff. Like this arm, it could be a lot of things. It's just a straight line. I don't know. So I think a pretty natural way to hold your arm is with the upper arm slightly going back, because there's usually that little bend at the elbow.
Yeah.
So I want to indicate that for myself. And then this upper arm slightly coming towards us. And that doesn't have to be the case, but that's what I'll draw here. And so when I structure these out, it kind of just, gives me a base to build on.
I can start to see how you then move into like making it more 3D by starting to add like some of the muscle lines and how all of the limbs sort of work together and connect in. That's great. That's really great. I honestly, I probably will try this method of like setting up a character for myself afterwards, just because I mostly do portraits, and I found that a lot of that comes from like, geez, maybe I need a little more work on anatomy, and maybe I need to kind of hone my process for how I get a character onto my canvas. So this is really cool. It's very insightful.
Yeah, and this is where a bit of anatomy knowledge kind of comes in, because you're simplifying the human form right here, but you do have to like I always put the chest here, and the way the chest connects with the deltoid, the shoulder muscles is pretty important. I think where the arms connect with the torso and where the legs connect with the torso are pretty tricky for people, like the way the legs connect in the hips. So
Yep.
Having a bit of anatomy knowledge for that is good, but I really try to focus on, simplifying the shapes, because that it's anatomy gets complex really quick.
Definitely. Also, Justin, yes, this is live indeed. If you have any questions for Sam Peterson, please post them in the chat, and I will make sure that he gets your question. Also, if any of you folks are watching over on YouTube right now, please come over to behance.net/live, because that is where I will be able to see your comments and your chatting. And then also, Cody Bear has reminded us that in a little bit, in about an hour, we are going to be doing portfolio reviews. So if you are a painter or an illustrator and you would like to get some feedback from Sam on your work, please follow the instructions in the portfolio review tab above the chat over on Behance, and it will kind of walk you through how you can submit your portfolio to us. We have a Discord, which Cody has also posted the link for, and we have a portfolio review channel in that Discord, and we are looking for Behance portfolios. If you have a Behance portfolio or an Adobe portfolio link that you can post in there with your work, we will be taking a look at 2 of those portfolios during the last 30 minutes of today's stream, kind of going through all of those projects and giving some feedback for improvement. So definitely a pretty cool thing. We typically do this on Mondays. So tomorrow we will still be taking some time at the end of the stream, but we will not be doing portfolio reviews. We will be doing challenge entry reviews, because there's also a challenge going on, which maybe we can get the link for the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge as well, because today is kind of like an intro day, but we will start revealing challenge entries tomorrow, and everyone will be able to check the Discord for those as well. Let's see. You do that too, Cody. Awesome. Paul Nottington or Naughton says this is all super helpful. I agree. And Jane Z says, Sam Peterson, how do you manage layers for your work? How many layers do you need for a finished work generally? Like, how do you use them, and what does that look like for you?
That's a good question too. So in the past, again, my workflow has varied. If you asked me this a year ago, my answer would be different than it is today. So I just always stress that there is no best way, and whatever works for you at the moment is a good way to go, but always be kind of seeking out, new methods and trying new things. So right now, I just create a new layer anytime I want to retain what I have below, but I want to start working on additional information. And if I mess it up or if it goes wrong, I like to keep that. So right now I only have 3 layers. Actually, I only really need 2. I'll delete this one because this was a preliminary sketch where I was doing a different pose, I think, and I changed it a little bit. So I have the pose layers of the people, the figure of the body, and then I have the costume layers. So that way, if I don't like the costume or the details, I can just erase it and scribble on top of my base figure. When I'm painting, I like to merge it down. So I used to work very structured. I would have a mask layer, then I would have a flat color layer, and then I would have a multiply layer for shadows, and then a color dodge layer for lights, and it was very structured and separated. Lately, I've been painting a lot more like as if I would be painting in oils, just paint on top of paint, just kind of alla prima in that way. So what I typically do, like here's a clothing
I'm
layer.
gonna bump myself over so they can see your layers panel here. Okay, go ahead.
So I have let's see. Oh yeah, and I have whiskers on, like these little details. I wasn't sure if I wanted to keep those. So anytime I'm trying something new, I make a new layer. And then if I like it, at some point I'll typically merge them all down. So I got the clothing layer because that's easy to edit. I got the whiskers because it's an extra detail. The glow is warping the colors of his staff, so I want that on a new layer. I always keep glows and effects on a separate layer. I have this levels adjustment layer, but honestly, I don't need it. What I would probably do, because these are all clipped to this original one, and I'd probably just merge these down. So
because you like that.
Yeah, I have no reason to want to keep those other ones. So I like to keep it simple, because this way, if I have everything clipped to a mask and I want to edit the silhouette, I have to change the mask, and I don't like going back and forth. So if I want to edit it, I like being able to do it very definitively. Like his ears are too big, so let's just
Mm-hmm.
chop those down. This way I can do it to one layer instead of multiple ones. It's really quick. His horns need to be longer. I don't want to have to edit the mask, so we'll give him little extra horns real quick.
Nice.
So I like to be able to be kind of aggressive and definitive about my decision making there. Maybe I want him to have like these little textury bits on his shoulder to be a bit more prominent.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I really like this and I want to do some big brush strokes or some big edits, I'll just make a new layer. I always do Control Shift N for a hotkey, and then I can clip that. Like this is my mask essentially, but I can just right click that new layer to create clipping mask. And now if I want to do some big edits where I don't want to edit the silhouette,
Mm-hmm.
it's much easier.
Nice. Yeah, that's typically what I do. I think clipping masks have become like a favorite of mine, just because, like, yeah, when you're working on, even if you're not an illustrator or a painter, but when you're working on something where you want to keep all of the new details like within the borders of your base shape or your base silhouette or whatever you're working on, it is so awesome to be able to have that clipping mask. And I found it's really improved my workflow, because I used to just start painting on it, and then I have this really bad habit, and maybe you do this too, or maybe other people in chat do this when they paint, is sometimes by accident, instead of using my eraser tool, I just sample the background color and just start painting around to trim the edges. And I hate it when I do that, but when I use clipping masks, it doesn't matter what's out of the lines, and I don't have to worry about cleaning up the edge of my character or my creature or whatever. I can just paint within those borders, so that feels really nice, rather than like,
sure.
Then I'm like, oh yeah, maybe I want to put a background on this, and then I go and I try to change the background color or add like a texture or a sky or whatever, and I realize there's like 2 inches around my character where I've painted like that light gray that I had previously, and I'm like, what is this?
I've gotten much better at avoiding that. Like that way that I just showed where I merged down the layers and then I cut into the silhouette.
Mm-hmm.
Since I've been doing that, there's no temptation or need or even like accident to do that. But oh man, I used to do that all the time.
It's so easy to.
Yeah, definitely. And I think someone asked about if it's a custom brush I use. Yeah, I can talk about my brushes in a moment. I did, on the topic of clipping masks, I would like to talk about some of my favorite Photoshop little shortcuts and tricks for those who are interested, because this is a good time, because these are the ones you'll see me use a lot in the drawing. So in this stage, what you're probably going to see me do a lot is flip the canvas. So flipping the canvas basically allows you to see the image with fresh eyes. It kind of allows your brain to see it as a new image. So if anything's skewed one way, flipping the canvas reveals that really nicely. A lot of times we just have a tendency and a bias to skew a face towards one direction for whatever reason. So flipping the canvas accentuates that and lets you see to the other extreme. So if you need to fix it, it's a really good way to do it. Or even if you don't know what's wrong with your picture and you flip it, a lot of times it'll reveal like, oh, okay, that's what's wrong. So what I do for that is I used to flip the canvas literally. I think it's under image. Then you can go to, is it image rotation, flip canvas horizontal. But what I do now, because it's a lot faster, is if you go to view, you can go to, let me see. Yeah, here we go, flip horizontal. So if you go up to view, flip horizontal, it literally just flips your view. It's not flipping the actual canvas. So if I save it either way, it's not going to change it. This is awesome when you're working on big files. So if you have a big illustration, whenever I flip the canvas, my computer loads for like 5 seconds or something. Even on my biggest files, I can flip it this quick. There's no loading.
That's amazing.
So you're going to see me doing that a lot, and I have it hotkeyed to Control T, which I believe is typically transform. I never use the hotkey for that, so I put Control T for flipping.
Wow. I always just right, because I like to go make hotkeys for things that don't have hotkeys yet, or maybe that have hotkeys that I'm not comfortable with. So I've routed my, to flip the whole canvas to Control Shift A, just because it's right next to Control Shift S, which is save as, and I will never forget it. But
Oh,
that's
okay.
awesome. That's a great tip for as far as like the loading and like the performance of Photoshop. That is fabulous.
Yeah,
Um,
Chad is in chat. He told me that, so big shout out to him because he's done a few of those where I'm like, oh my god, I didn't know
yeah.
that.
Why
My
did I not
life
know
has
this?
changed.
Mm-hmm.
So
Also,
props to him.
Claudie is in the chat right now, and she said when she saw VooDoo Val and Sam were on together, she had to tune in. So welcome in, Claudie. Thank you so
Hey,
much.
good to see you.
Um,
Um, what was? Oh yeah, another one real quick is Warp. Um, I know a lot of people. I've seen them in different, daily creative challenges. Uh, the puppet warp I don't really use as much. I think
mhm.
if I was doing a more finished character and I had to warp it, I would. But what you'll see me use a lot at this stage is just the regular warp. So I tend to have characters lean too far one way or the other. I did it on this character.
Mhm.
Let me take off the costume and I can probably show you better. Let's save it so I can undo it. But I'll select what I want to warp, and I use this all the time. Like I said, for poses, I hotkeyed it to F4, um, and it's basically just you can make them, you can kind of shift their lean,
Mhm. And
and
the new
depending on.
warp is really great compared to what it was maybe a few years ago, because now I feel like there's so much more room to really get in there and edit and warp around, whereas before we had like that big grid over the top, and now you can actually add your own grid lines to it so that the
Mhm.
warp is perfect for whatever you are editing specifically, which is really convenient.
Yeah, there's a lot of flexibility, and for me, since it's a really loose stage, these are just big, clean, or like quick and messy edits.
Mhm.
Since the sketch is so messy to begin with, but like if I want to move the leg out a bit, I can just grab that foot and kind of stretch it a bit.
Mhm.
Um, if I had to do this recently with the character, but the legs were all out of proportion, so I can actually just grab it and extend it, or I could grab like
Nice.
the knee and push the knee down, push the knee up, and again, it's pretty loose, but my sketch is loose. It's not finished line drawing.
Mhm.
If it was a finished piece, I'd probably be a bit more specific with how I'm warping it, puppet warp or setting up my own guides. Um, but it really just allows you a lot of flexibility because I think when I flipped this initially, I know it now, it looks pretty crazy, but they were lean too much. So I was like, oh, I'll just push them back a bit.
Looks good.
So,
Stella, welcome in. Guide us how to make cartoons. I think that a lot of the information that Sam is sharing today can really be applied to a lot of different kinds of illustration. You know, even though Sam might not be doing like cartoon work right off the bat, I think um, no matter how many rules you break maybe with the anatomy of a character, no matter how wild a character is or how simple or how detailed, I think a lot of these things about like making sure that first initial form is as accurate to what you're working on as it can be is still very important. Or kind of like how you're talking about studying anatomy, because you do, in my opinion, you do have to kind of know the rules before you can break them, you know?
absolutely.
So that helps.
Yeah, and the thing about this method that I do, simplifying shapes, focusing on all these, like most the fundamental of what you're drawing is that that's what cartoons are. When you see cartoons, it's like a circle for the head or a square for the head.
Mm-hmm.
It's basically taking that to the extreme. So with a cartoon, you wouldn't put muscle definition like I am.
Mm-hmm.
You probably wouldn't have this how the pec inserts into the shoulder there. That's not really necessary. But the beginning of what I do, you can just take those shapes and make them, stylized. Like they don't have to be realistic proportions, which
Mm-hmm.
is what I'm doing when I'm building out these figures. I'm doing like, I'm trying to make this head realistic proportion to block it out, but you can do whatever you want. You can do like a big head. It's just focused on the simplification of it.
Yeah.
And then maybe they've got like a skinny neck, round body. It's just, you can if you look at Pixar and all those things, you see how they use basic shapes to create unique characters. And
Yeah.
a lot of times it's contrasting shapes and sizes too.
definitely contrasting shapes and sizes, especially with Pixar, because they do some wild things, but it works together, because even though they are, they're skewing that anatomy fact, they're still making it work. They're still kind of inventing their own thing that works based on what is true, and so it's sometimes it can be like a fine line to walk. I've noticed when I've tried to do like more, because I'm kind of more on your wavelength as far as like the kind of subject matter that I do, maybe, and we're both kind of in, like, I don't know, I think maybe I've heard people call it like semi-realism, because obviously it's not like I never do anything that's like photo perfect, but still, the times that I've been like, all right, I'm gonna do like more of a cartoony or kind of a simplistic character, I still notice that like I can't just start making like cute round shapes. I have to really think about how it connects into each other. Otherwise, it's not really very dynamic.
Definitely, yeah.
Let me see. I'm gonna look through and see if we have missed any questions.
I think I'm just gonna do one more of these little character sketches, and we can maybe get into painting and talk a bit about how I simplify form with value.
Sounds good. Also, I just want to point out that we do have about 45 minutes until we do the portfolio reviews. So if anyone is interested in getting a portfolio review from Sam and having him kind of look at your work, we are looking for Behance portfolios and Adobe portfolios that are kind of focused more on illustration and painting. Portfolios that are relevant to the subject matter of this particular stream. And if you join our Discord, we have a channel in there called #portfolio-reviews. You can drop your portfolios in there, and we will be taking a look at 2 of the portfolios out of the pool that gets submitted. And then also, if you are maybe watching the stream, but maybe you're not an illustrator, or you're not a painter, maybe you do like UI UX, for example, we will have another segment coming up later today centered around UI UX design, and they will be doing portfolio reviews as well, but focused on the subject matter of that stream. So we do this a couple times a day, every Monday, so that everyone can have a chance to be selected for the reviews. So get those entries in soon, folks. Yes, Cody Bear just posted the little reminder there. Thank you, Cody. And also a link to the Discord. And if you're over on YouTube, you're probably not seeing any of this, and that is because we are focusing on the chat over on behance.net/live. So if you can head over there and check out the chat, you will be able to see all of our comments. We will be able to see your comments. You will be able to see all the helpful resources and links that our mods are posting for you, and you will also get the chat and info and portfolio review informational tabs above the chat, where you will get more details and instructions on how to join us. You guys spoke to 3D a bit. How do Sam's sketches port to 3D environments? Workflow suggestions. Thanks. This is from Mensa Moody.
How do they port to 3D environments? Workflow. I don't do anything directly with 3D. Like, I don't have a workflow that goes into 3D directly, but essentially if I'm designing anything for 3D, and I guess in general, excuse me, I try to focus on these 3D shapes. Like when I draw, I'm trying to think completely in 3 dimensions. So the goal would be, if someone had to model a character I did or anything like that, they would have a pretty clear indication of what the shapes are just based off my drawing and painting.
Mm-hmm.
That's at least, what I'm trying to convey when I do these. I'm hoping that it has a convincing sense, so it's clear to the modeler if I were to do that.
Nice. Let's see.
So this guy just wants I think this guy just wants dinner. He's got a little knife and fork. I don't know what I'm doing here.
This guy just wants dinner. This is perfect.
He's aggressively hungry.
Yeah, he's got like this stance, like he's like on the hunt for some serious ham. He's not playing around at all.
Serious ham.
Serious ham, not not like mellow ham, nothing regular about this ham.
I think we're designing a ham advertisement now.
Yes, we
It's
are.
gonna be.
I think that that's gonna have to be where this goes because now I have my
So
heart set on it.
so I use the lasso tool all the time as well. I mean, you saw me using that with the smudge tool, but if I have to resize things, this is why I like to keep them loose in the beginning, because
Mm-hmm.
you can resize it, you can warp it, you can reposition it, and nothing gets messed up because you haven't put enough details in it yet. But you'll also probably notice that I'm constantly zoomed out, and I'm hoping I'm not too zoomed out for everyone. But this is how I work, and I think it's the number one reason I have success when I do, for doing things loosely and quickly, because I stay zoomed out when I draw, I stay zoomed out when I paint, and that allows me to get so much more information so much quicker. And it's kind of the difference. I think part of it is I've always been a perfectionist since I started, and I've always since then been actively trying to fight against it.
Mm-hmm.
And when I draw from this level of zoom, it's like I'm drawing in my sketchbook. And I think if you guys have done drawings and paintings before, you know the difference where drawing in your sketchbook is a lot less stressful. There's a lot less pressure than, let's say, like a 3 foot by 3 foot canvas that you have to fill up. You know what I
Yep.
mean? It's this overwhelming and intimidating thing. But if you're just doing that same painting and you're trying to draw it in the sketchbook, it's just like it's casual. You know, you're just focusing on the big stuff. And with digital, we have the ability to get like in here right away,
Mm-hmm.
and I find that takes about 500 times longer. And when I zoom out of this face, since I won't have any context to the rest of the body, or if it's an illustration, you won't have any context to the rest of the composition. You zoom out and you're like, oh wow, that face is like terrible.
It's
It's like,
really small.
yeah, and it's like nothing. You zoom out and you're like, that looks ridiculous. But if I block in those major sections from here where I can see all the context involved, then I have much more luck. So if anyone's curious why I'm always zoomed out, that's why. I think it's probably, if I was to tell past Sam like tips for art, the number one thing that I always go back to is stay zoomed out. I mean, that's just me, but I think there's a lot of kind of universal benefit to that.
Oh, absolutely. I have the issue where I love to paint faces, and so when I know that I have to do a painting that calls for a lot more detail than one of my regular portraits, I have to force myself to stay zoomed out because what I'll do if I don't is I will get so focused and so obsessed with like detailing the face that while the whole rest of the body is still a sketch, I will zoom in really close and I will like detail like a really awesome face, and then when I zoom out, usually what I've done is the whole head is like 3 times the size that's necessary for the particular character that I'm illustrating, and I'm like, what have I
Yeah,
done? It's good to stay zoomed out so you can keep everything relative to the entire form. Otherwise you might end up with like a bobblehead character, and that's
absolutely.
not good unless it's exactly what you're going for, but I doubt it.
Yeah. And it just lets you keep the whole impact of the character or whatever the piece is in mind. It's always the important stuff. Is the silhouette looking good?
Hmm.
Is the color scheme and the value layout good? And that's everything that the viewer is saying when they view a piece. It's always zoomed out, the full piece, and that's the initial impact. So you want to be able to see it like that as much as possible. And one of the ways to do that, another little Photoshop tip that I think is pretty helpful, is if you are zoomed in, because I still do zoom in. It's usually towards the later half, but you know sometimes you need to.
Hmm.
So say I'm working on the face here, so I do want to zoom in a bit so I can kind of start detailing it if I'm at that stage. What I do is, if you have two monitors, and even if you don't, you can do this. Just go up to let's see, window, and then arrange,
Hmm.
and you can do at the bottom here new window, and it'll say your document name. So
Oh, I
window
love it.
arrange, you click that, it pops up a new tab for it. So now I have this, and I can, if you just have one monitor, this is what you can kind of do. This is what I would do. I would just put it over here while I work on this. And the thing is, when you draw on this one, you'll see it update on the other, and you can, if you want to, you can even draw on the other one and it'll update here. So it's a nice way to keep that zoomed out view, keep that thumbnail view. Um, but you have some flexibility. I know there's like the navigator. You
Mm-hmm.
can move this around. You can move it on another monitor. One thing that you're not seeing here, which is really, really cool, I'll show you. This is a big benefit of it, I suppose. Window arrange, new document. So what I'll do a lot of times for these is I'll put it on my other monitor and I'll put it grayscale.
Yes.
So you'll have your values, because the values are what are important. Color is secondary to values. If your values, your darks and your lights aren't reading, you're not going to have a three-dimensional look. So a lot of times I like to have my values up on my other monitor. So when I'm painting on this guy, I can make sure the values are looking tight. I suppose that leads directly into one more tip I was going to talk about later. But this is a tip for grayscale. So if you want to be able to switch grayscale up like this really quickly, there's a hotkey you can set up. So if anyone has Photoshop open right now, I can go through it. It's just like 2 steps. It's really, really easy. You go up to View, Proof Setup, and there's Custom. So View, Proof Setup, Custom. When you pop this window up, you'll see the device to simulate. If you check it and you select working gray dot gain 20% and click OK, it's gonna make your document grayscale. And this is like a really accurate grayscale.
Mm-hmm.
And then you just press Control Y to toggle it on and off. Now it's not changing your document, your actual pixels, to grayscale. It's just changing your view, much like the flipping we did earlier. That's just changing the view. It's not changing the canvas. That's doing the same thing. And what's best about that is you can actually color pick this grayscale, and you'll see it's grabbing colors. So I can paint in this mode by color picking my canvas. And when I toggle it back, it's not gray tones, it's all color.
That is one of my favorite like useful pro tips ever. It's something that I have been doing for a lot of years, and I think that when I first started using that method of like the working dot gain, or is it working? Yeah, working dot gain 20%. When I first started using that, I have to say that I think it like shaved off so much time from my process, but it also made all of my paintings way more accurate because it was something I could do so quickly and easily to keep track of the values and keep track of everything going on in my painting, rather than doing, I know a lot of people will put like a color layer, they'll fill it with black and then turn it to color and then toggle it on and off, because my problem is that while that works, I still want to sometimes like paint on it while it's grayscale, and I can't do that if I'm using like an adjustment layer or a blending mode or something, because everything that is, if I paint above it, I have to actually paint in grayscale, and when I toggle it off, then all of my strokes are in black and white, which does not work for me. So that is like probably one of the most useful things I have ever learned to do in Photoshop where my painting is concerned, for sure.
Yeah, anyone who does any sort of painting, I feel like it's kind of an invaluable thing. And the thing is, I have Control Y for that, toggling it on and off, and flipping right next to each other. So I can quickly access any, sort of, those are frequently used functions. So
Nice.
I can access them all very quickly. And, of course, if anyone uses Photoshop and has a function they use frequently, it's always good to know the hotkey for it. And if it doesn't have one, set one up yourself, because once you commit that to memory, which doesn't take long at all, it drastically speeds up your workflow.
Jennifer is asking about using image rotation. Does it work?
Just rotating the canvas?
Yeah, I haven't seen you rotate a lot. Is that something you do a lot, or is it maybe just too early in your process to be doing it constantly?
I'm trying to think if I do it more in the drawing or painting phase. I definitely rotate the canvas. I would say it's probably, if I had to guess, more in the painting phase, or more in the drawing phase.
Oh,
because I think everyone may know, like when you rotate your sketchbook when you're drawing, some strokes, some lines you're trying to hit it's more natural to do it at certain angles and directions than others.
Absolutely.
So if I need to hit a certain line or angle and it feels awkward, I'll just rotate it a little bit and hit it. And I've probably done that with brush strokes, but I feel like brush strokes are a lot, they're not these big fluid strokes. They're little like, just placing a mark, very short. So in that
Yeah.
case, I don't think I typically need to rotate for that. But yeah, I definitely use rotate canvas.
Yeah, and I'm the same way, Jennifer. I use rotate canvas constantly, exactly for the reason that you said, Sam. Because sometimes I'm right-handed, and I find that like when I'm drawing like a curve, that doing that curve or that line or whatever I'm drawing, it's way better from certain angles than it is from others. And so when I can rotate my canvas, I definitely get like a more confident, sure, accurate stroke. But I think I would say that I use the image rotation probably just as much in the painting phase as I do in the sketching phase, just because sometimes I find that when I am painting a face that's like straight on and symmetrical, I need something that will break up the symmetry. Otherwise, I get too used to looking at it, because at that point, when you rotate your canvas, if you've been doing it a lot and it's accurate enough, like your face is symmetrical and accurate enough, and maybe you don't have any defining features like scars, or maybe the lighting isn't such that you have like a dramatic light side and a dramatic dark side. Even when you rotate your canvas, you can still get a little bit of that feeling like you've been looking at the same thing too long and you need kind of fresh eyes on it. So sometimes I will rotate a portrait upside down,
Hmm.
so I'm seeing it differently, and then look at the symmetry there, or look at my colors there, or I'll just turn it on its side and I'll start painting and detailing from its side, just to kind of give me a new perspective on what I'm working on.
Yeah, definitely. I think all those things kind of help. And actually, what I just realized is I flip canvas for almost the same reason as rotating. So for some reason, doing this paint stroke to the right on this arm is slightly more awkward. I could totally do it, but I do catch myself doing this a lot, where doing it this way is somehow more
Mm-hmm.
fluid. So I kind of flip the canvas for the same reason.
Yeah.
How much time do we have before portfolio reviews?
We have about 28 minutes, and then we are going to
Yeah.
dive into those. So,
Cool.
everyone in chat, if you have not shared your portfolio and you would like to, we're looking for Behance and Behance portfolios and Adobe portfolios, like the My Portfolio links. Um, and you can post those into the portfolio review channel in our Discord, which will toss a link into the Behance chat for you folks soon. And what we're going to do is we're going to have 2 of those portfolios that we can go over. We wish we could go over more, but in order to do like a full illustration stream and also do the reviews every Monday, we are kind of limited on the amount that we can choose. But this isn't the only time we do these. So if yours does not get selected, you can continue to share them for the next weeks and hopefully get a review. And for this segment, we're doing illustration and painting, so any portfolios related to that. But later on in the day, we will have a UI UX stream, and you can submit portfolios for that kind of work as well, to get a chance to have your work reviewed. Daniel says, although I do rotate the Wacom a little bit if need be. Oh, gotcha. So you like rotate the entire tablet. That's very interesting. I find that sometimes when I'm painting in fresco, even though I can rotate the canvas in fresco, sometimes I just turn the iPad because it's so easy and it almost feels like I'm using paper. So I'll be sitting at my desk and I'll just like rotate the whole entire device and sketch that way. How did you guys... Oh, sorry. Go for it.
Oh no, go ahead.
How
Was
did
there
you
a
guys,
question?
yeah, get your first commissions? Is it just a case of constantly working on your portfolio until it's noticed, or did you find jobs to apply for?
I think I tried to maintain some sort of activity online when I was first going, and I think the more active you are online, the more people are going to contact you potentially. So if you're constantly posting on Instagram and forums and anywhere people really share that kind of stuff, you're on a streaming platform or anything like that, that's kind of putting you out in the public eye more, which I think just increases your chance. Of course, if you're say you want to do fantasy publishing illustration, you can contact all the companies that are doing that too. Put yourself out there for people to find you, but also directly contact, go to the people that you want to see you as well. So any companies that you know of. I think people just saw me from my presence online back then, and that's how I got my first initial ones.
Nice. Yeah, I think okay, Sam and I both stream on Twitch, and I think that is kind of how I got like a lot of business at the very beginning, is like people coming through and seeing the stream and seeing me paint, and they were like, oh, that's really cool, could you paint something for me? And then by that, after those initial like inquiries, then the work that I did for those people kind of got spread, and it's like, oh, hey, I saw you do something for so and so, can you do something like that for me too? And then it kind of spreads by word of mouth, and then obviously continuing to curate an online portfolio where people could, like, even if they did spread word about me through by word of mouth and stuff, they could say, oh yeah, this is the person who did that that design for me, and then send over my portfolio to their friends, and they look through it and decide if that's what they want to do. So yeah, like you said, just kind of building a presence. But I also find streaming really does help if that's something that you're interested in. Everyone in the chat, if doing creative broadcasts, or even just making creative videos and stuff online is an option for you, I found that I do find a lot of people that approach me specifically because they saw a video of me working, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great way to get out there.
What are the tips or points to take care about while illustrating characters for motion design or animation? I would say personally, if you're designing something, if you're illustrating characters and designing specifically for motion design and animation, I would say you can't really leave much to the imagination if you're going to be turning in assets that are going to have to function properly. I'd love to hear what you think as well, Sam, but I think that, like, if they're gonna take your art and they're gonna chop it up and they're gonna animate it and make it look like a person is walking or dancing or running or whatever, you have to make sure that your characters are very accurate, because they're gonna have to move like people would move, or like that creature would move, or whatever. Like, it's got to be pretty specific, I think, rather than doing a painting where the behind, like, the back of the character is not visible, or some of the arms are maybe hidden behind things. You would have to draw everything and make sure it works. What do you think, Sam?
Yeah, that, and I think we kind of mentioned this, but simplification, like anything. If you're drawing something, for animation, or even if it's in 3D, but you have to have good simplified shapes. I mean, that's why you see cartoons are usually hand-drawn animation is so simple, because you need to be able to rotate those shapes in any direction. Also, simplified shapes is usually just good design if it has a clear, readable silhouette and design. But yeah, I think that's why you see a lot of animators do like turnarounds for their portfolios. Just things with, I don't want to use the word simplified, but clear, readable shapes, I would say, probably what seems to be important from what I can tell. Though I don't really have experience directly with animation.
Awesome. I've done some animation just in Photoshop, because I love animating in the Photoshop timeline. But I found that typically, like, I'm always illustrating way more than I would if I was just doing like a static image. And that was like kind of eye-opening for me, because when you see animations, like, because I like making GIFs of stuff, and just having like maybe a character's eyes are blinking, or maybe a character's hair is moving or something, just to make things more interesting. That was like the main thing, is that I was like, I actually have to draw like maybe 3 times more than I would if I want to show what's behind and how it moves. And I'm just like, oh, not what I thought it was going to be. But as I got into it, it became obvious, like, duh, that's of course what I would have to do, because I have to show this. Like, I did for Halloween, I did a series called The Spooks, and I tried to animate as many of the illustrations as possible, and I did this one that was like, I painted a pumpkin, and then I painted the top of that pumpkin like pulling off, and then there's like ooze like in between that kind of pulls and is connected from the top of the pumpkin to the inside, and then it snaps back down. And I don't know why, but when I first went into it, I was like, yeah, I'm just going to paint this pumpkin. And that's what I did. And then as I started animating it, and I realized I could cut the top of the pumpkin off and I could animate it going up and down. But what I actually had to do is I had to add that little lip of crust around that you don't see sometimes when it's closed. And I had to animate the back lip and crust and like internal part of the pumpkin too that I hadn't illustrated before, and I was like, oh wow, this is a lot more than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, I think a lot of times there can be things you don't really consider otherwise.
Just like to say how much I appreciate y'all from Mensa Moody. Thank you.
Hey, Mensa Moody. I don't know how much time we have exactly, but is there enough to talk about maybe clipping masks real quick?
Oh, absolutely. I think we have about 20 minutes left.
Oh, okay.
And then we're going to have 30 minutes for the portfolio reviews. And sometimes the portfolio reviews we get done a handful of minutes early, so you'll still have time to like recap and go over a couple more things maybe at the end.
Awesome. Okay, so I think that puts us in a pretty good spot. Earlier, I made this mask of this character. We can start working on him. And I'll show you how clipping masks work just in case anyone doesn't use them. And then someone did ask about my brushes earlier. So I think before the portfolio reviews, we can fit in clipping masks. I can talk about my brushes, and then that should be a good time to switch over.
Sounds good.
So the like you saw, I'll typically do these sketches. I'll just kind of have fun with it. And once I have a design that I feel pretty comfortable with, I'll make a mask. So a mask is just a shape. I'm essentially just drawing the shape here. And now that I take the lines away, I can kind of see I'm missing. Let me see here. Oh, I locked it. That's why. Lock transparencies. So I usually use this brush. There's like zero opacity jitter, so it's just completely filled in. And I'll fill in a mask here according to my lines. I'll use that as a guide. And once you have that, you can make a new layer. So Control-Shift-N is what I always use, and I like to name them. I think there's a hotkey Control-Shift-Alt-N. I think it just makes a new layer directly, yeah. But I like to name them, so Control-Shift-N still lets you name it. And then from here, what you can do, if you see this mask layer that I have below, actually, let me delete this part. I didn't realize I kept. There we go. You can just take this new mask or this new layer above the mask layer, right click the new layer, do create clipping mask, and it'll now attach it to the bottom one. And at this point, what's really cool, I typically get like a texture brush or something with a little bit more interest. You can just paint, inside the shape. So it's what I like to do, and you may get the idea with these, is I just kind of create this silhouette, this drawing, and then I block in a color palette. And I do it really freely and loosely. And it allows me a lot of freedom, especially at this point, because I'm zoomed out like, okay, we got this kind of pinkish tone. What if I like this? So now I'm getting this almost idea like, oh, he's wearing pants and he's got this kind of skirt loinclothy bit, and it looks like this kind of faded just linen or something. And maybe this is his skin tone, but maybe we don't want that. Maybe he's like blue, and I can really quickly experiment with ideas in a very painterly way, in a very abstract way almost, where I can just have fun with it. And this is one of my favorite parts. I can be like, all right, well, are his feet showing? Does he have red hair? And I can just go nuts. And you can see I'm not being clean with it, but I'm almost creating a color palette the way you would see a painter on canvas. Like when they're just doing these big, it's almost abstract, right? Like you're putting some blue in there, you're putting some this color. Maybe the blue is really big and you cut back and you put a little accent of red. You can almost think of it like an abstract painting. And once I like the feel, I can kind of move on from there. So this is a part where I can just be free to mess around with colors and have fun with it before I worry about values and before I worry about getting a sense of 3D dimension with my painting.
Nice, nice.
So we'll come back to this. I think we'll probably do this mostly tomorrow. Today we talked mostly about three-dimensional shape within drawing. You can see that my key takeaway here is simplify the shapes. Break down the human figure into whatever makes sense for you. Read different drawing books that show how they break down the figure. Find what works for you and use that. I do that egg shape for the rib cage, box for the hips, box for the head, cylinders for the arms and legs. And I use form lines to really tell myself which direction in space those shapes are going. I think if you have all that, you have the shapes and the direction they're going in space, you're going to have a pretty solid structure to it.
Those directional lines are so incredibly helpful too, and I started
Definitely.
doing that after I think you know of Poos.
Yeah, for sure.
I watched him draw one time, and I thought that is so brilliant. And then I started doing that, and I gotta tell you guys, like, doing the form and then putting those directional lines, it helps me visualize everything in a 3D space so much easier than just doing like a flat illustration and then putting everything in. It is so helpful. And I can't recommend it enough. And it's really cool to see that you're doing it as well, Sam, because instantly, like, I'm looking at these sketches that you have, and they don't look like just plain drawings to me. I can really already kind of see how you might go about rendering them in 3D, and pulling those forms out, like it just clicks in my brain. It makes sense to me already.
Yeah. And that's kind of what I'm trying to do for myself, because if you can make the drawing I will say is the most important part. If you can get solid structure, solid three-dimensional structure in your drawing, painting it becomes so much easier. Speaking of painting, since that's all I really want to say about clipping masks, this is how I use it. And at a certain point, I might merge these two layers so I won't have a separate shape. So here's my initial mask shape. Here's the colors on top of it, and these are the lines. Usually at some point I'll merge these two layers. So I'll just have the painting and I'll have the lines.
Gotcha.
But we'll do that a little bit more tomorrow. Like I said, I know someone asked about brushes, so I can talk about that real quick. And like I said, we'll get into more painting stuff tomorrow, but let's make a layer for brushes. I do have my brushes available if anyone is curious.
Yeah, I've got them right here.
Okay, cool. I only really use the first three. So here's my brush set. This is, years old. But the first three are the ones I actually use. One's inking brush, the other is labeled Paling's brush, and then there's sampled brush 1-3. This one I'm going to be talking about tomorrow, but tomorrow what we'll be going over, this is a paint over I did, by the way. This is not my piece. This was a drawing done by AdArt from my Twitch stream viewer. And I did a paint over to talk about value. Basically saying how I simplify value into three forms: dark, like shadow, midtone, and highlight. And I use a smudge brush to blend them together really quickly to create a sense of 3D form. So this is what I use this brush for a lot. It's my basic aggressive block-in brush. It doesn't look pretty. I don't care about like the texture or anything. It's simply used to establish information pretty quickly. So
get that point across.
Yeah, and a lot of times I like to do like shapes, like if I'm designing on him, maybe he's got like a shoulder pad, or maybe he's got crazy hair. It's just like this really kind of aggressive way to try out an idea and establish it. And I find it's kind of like when I draw, when I'm trying to do the biggest brush strokes I can, if I can just hit that value from the get-go.
Everyone is so excited that we shared brushes in the chat. They're freaking out.
People like brushes. So that's the inking brush that you will all see in the brush pack. I use it like this all the time, and we'll talk about smudge tomorrow. I would basically say it now, but you can just see I use it to blend, but there's a lot of nuance I'd like to discuss, so we'll save that for tomorrow's stream.
Okay.
But you'll see me use this all the time with the smudge technique. So that's that brush. I love this brush.
Yes, I'm very eager to kind of see how, because every time that I, like, the smudge brush is never usually like something that's like built into my own process, just because I have to really noodle with the settings so that my system doesn't like lag whenever I do like a large stroke, but I'm seeing that
Yeah.
you're using it so effortlessly here, and it's just like kind of, it's flowing very well. So I'm really excited for tomorrow just to kind of gain some insight onto into how you use it for your own process. That should be really fun.
Yeah, the smudge tool can definitely be pretty system intensive, and it kind of is for mine, but I try not to use it too big. I don't use it for big gradients. I'll use an airbrush for that. But yeah,
Gotcha.
we'll definitely talk about that tomorrow. And you guys will see these brushes in use more. I'm gonna explain it now, but when you really see it in action is when it'll probably make more sense. So
Hmm.
this brush is the Palang's brush. You can see the stamp of it here. I really like it because it's very chiselly, if that
Hmm.
makes sense. When I paint, you some of you may know if you've done painting before. There's a lot of talk in painting about painting planes, the planes of the face or the planes of a structure where the
Hmm.
light is hitting, well, where it's facing away from the light. So when I do these things, I'll do these kind of definitive. Actually, no, I can't. Let's do this in the painting. I'll do it on the painting layer, it stays in the clipping mask. So when I do these, I'll do these kind of chiseled forms. I know there's a shadow under the peck here.
Hmm.
Um, his head would be casting some sort of shadow, probably. So it allows me to be very definitive with my form and kind of chisel in these planes, thinking planar forms, and just make these kind of aggressive blocking out decisions. And so I use this for the vast majority of the beginning of my painting. I'd say I use this for the majority of my painting in general. This is probably the bulk of what I use. I really like
Nice.
that round brush that I told you about,
Hmm.
but this is probably the one I use the vast majority. Um, and the last brush I'll show you is what I use to finish to get like texture.
I love this. Yeah, I that brush that you're using is probably my favorite brush. I think I've been using it for like maybe 4 years, and it's
Oh yeah,
always my default go-to like textury brush, because I personally I have to be using a brush that's like charcoaly or
yeah,
pastelly, in
for
order, which
sure.
I always say it's so funny that people feel that way, because technically we're all using a stylus and putting that stylus to Cintiq or tablet, which is funny,
Yeah,
but it's weird how using a textury brush really makes me feel like I'm messing around with charcoal. Like I can almost
yeah,
feel
yeah.
that grit and feel that texture, and it's comfortable to me. Even though anytime I switch brushes, I'm literally using the exact same tool. So,
Yeah, and it's like, people always say brushes don't matter, and I agree. It's like if you know how to paint, you know how to paint with anything.
mhm,
Like it's the way you're making the mark that matters, not the mark itself. But there is something about certain brushes that like are conducive to a certain workflow or a way of
mhm,
thinking. Like
yep,
this one totally makes me think in planes and
mhm,
like chiseling shapes in. Um, the hard brush I use with the smudge tool, like my mindset's different. It's hard to explain, but when you find the right brush and the right tool, it can really help like facilitate the way you work.
yeah, totally. And it's interesting too, because it's like you're saying, yeah, it goes with a very specific workflow. So there's certain brushes that make you feel comfortable doing certain things, which technically, if you really wanted to, you could use like the soft round brush to do everything. There's a lot of artists that do that, where they just use the default brushes in Photoshop. But
Hmm.
for me, if you hand me like this chocolate brush, I'm gonna do certain things. Whereas if you hand me a brush that's like called like palette knife, I'm gonna be so comfortable using that palette knife brush to like do hard edges and like cut creases and everything on a character. Even though it's like I could probably use the round brush to do that as well, but there's just something in my brain, that just tells me like what I can use it for and what's comfortable. And sometimes you can find brushes that are shaped a certain way that make it very easy. Like I have a brush that I like to use where one side of it is sharp and one side of it is like an airbrush, and so I just
Hmm.
rotate my canvas and go in certain directions that either put the like the hard edge or like the soft edge, which is cool. um
Yeah.
and it's kind of like two brushes in one, but it really depends on like the mindset of the user sometimes. But however, you're very very right in that you should not really rely on brushes to be like the backbone of your work, you know, like that comes from practicing and honing your skill, so that even if you have like fancy brushes you're using, if I gave you like a sharp round brush, you could still manage to paint something or draw something just as accurately. It just might not have like your preferred texture or flair that maybe it would have if you used your favorite custom brushes, but you can still manage, you know. Like there's artists that they use a lot of brushes, but they could probably take a stick and go outside and draw something in the dirt that looks decent, you know, because you can kind of create art with anything if you understand how to do it. But the brushes don't hurt.
Yeah, I mean, I used just the hard and soft round brushes in Photoshop for I think 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
I've been painting in Photoshop for about 10 now,
Mm-hmm.
and I think the reason I switched to textured brushes, like I was always the guy who didn't use textured brushes. I just used the default. Like
I
was
remember
kind of
that for a while.
yeah. And I don't know what it was. I think when you grow and evolve, things change. Like who knows exactly, but I do think a big part of it was that I've been trying to get a more realistic look. I used to do a bit more stylized work.
Mm-hmm.
I've been trying to get a bit more like, you know, the old masters you see,
Mm-hmm.
the kind of texture and the edges. Like I've been trying to do a little bit more of that stuff, and I think I've just found a lot of benefit from texture brushes. But
Nice.
and then the last one, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Last brush before I forget. I'm getting all into it. This is, I'll do a little stamp of it. This is I don't know what it's called. Oh, whoops, I'm on the wrong layer. I know this is Feng Huizong's brush, an artist I really like. I didn't know it was his brush. I used it a long time before, and I wanted to see what brushes he used because I'm a big fan of his, like the finish he gets on his work. And I realized it was the same brush I have. So I use this one to get like refined texture at the end. So when you're seeing me finish a painting, or like for hair, you'll see me, you know, kind of get a bit more of a softer textured edge with hair. But this is what I use for like cleaning it up and finishing it. Chisel it all in with this brush here. Block in major things with this brush. I love this one for skin, but this is all about texture and finishing. So I'll do a little bit on the painting here, and you can see some of the texture I can get.
Cody Bear and Wadecuff are both saying that they do remember the days where Sam did not use any texture brushes at all, and I totally do too. Yes, indeed.
That's funny. Yeah, that was a long time.
Also, Cody says in 3 minutes we will be doing portfolio reviews, so post your Behance to the portfolio reviews channel in the Photoshop Discord for a chance to be featured. Yes, indeed. And if you folks are over on YouTube, please come over to behance.net/live because we are going to be reading the chat and discussing things over here on Behance. We cannot see the YouTube chat, so if you're typing over there and you're wondering why we haven't given you a shout out and welcomed you to the stream, it's probably because you got to be over here in the Behance chat. You can also get the link to the Discord over here, and there's also a portfolio review tab above the Behance chat where you can get a little more details about the portfolio reviews and how they work and the requirements for that. For today, since we are doing a illustration and painting stream, we are looking for portfolios that are relevant to that. But if you are not an illustrator or painter and you're perhaps a designer or you are a UI UX designer of some sort, we will have a segment more keyed to that later on today so that you can submit portfolios for those. And if you do not get selected for a portfolio review today, fear not. We do these every Monday that we are live, because sometimes we do have Mondays off, like last week. But Mondays, if we are live here on Adobe Live, we will do the portfolio reviews. So you can always continue to submit in the future and hopefully get a feature on the stream. Jennifer says, still trying to make sense of my portfolio. One day I may submit, but I'm also going to hide. Well, Jennifer, I think a common misconception about doing these portfolio reviews is that if you want to submit, then your portfolio has to be good. You know, like your portfolio has to be perfect so that you can show it off. But the point of this is to actually improve. So if you're really struggling kind of putting your portfolio together, but you have a few things up there that you might need feedback on, we can give feedback not just on your specific work, but also on how your portfolio is being presented, and maybe you can get some feedback from us for how to improve for another time. So definitely, you're definitely not barred from posting your portfolio just because it might not be as finished as you would like. We would still love to see them.
Definitely, yeah. That's the whole point, just to be able to get some guidance and direction.
Chad Rolfs is dipping out for the day. He's going to play MTG. Good man.
Chad.
Nice.
Have a good one, Chad.
Oh, maybe he's saying run to a meeting. Maybe I'm just a nerd. Yeah, I gotta run to a meeting, I think, is what he's saying.
I thought it was Magic the Gathering.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. Okay, thank God I'm not alone, because he was like, yeah, I gotta go run pay MTG, and I was like, oh yes, great excuse. Please go, have fun. Have a good day, sir.
Whatever, Chad. Yeah. Have a good one, Chad.
Yeah, have a good day, man. And it is time for portfolio reviews now. That muscle definition, Sam, is like pushing all the art buttons for me, by the way. Like, it's so it's so good, and I'm just like watching you kind of pull that form out of like all of the more subtle and simple strokes that you've been doing, and now it looks like a buff man. It's just so good. It's very good.
So this is me kind of playing around with the texture. Just the color palette is really this stage, and tomorrow we'll totally get more into the form of it all.
Yeah, I gotta do some more work on my anatomy, man, because just like the definition of like that shoulder pushing to the front, and and then like the lighter values like on the pec on the front there, I'm just like, that's good. Those little folds in skin and muscles sometimes just like really look so cool to me. And they're also they're also very, very satisfying to paint as well. Like when you kind of just zone out and do it.
I think we have a similar like thing that we like, because a lot of times I'll see you painting stuff and I'm like, ooh, that's a good torso right there.
Yeah, I'm the same way. Anytime I see you painting live, I'm just like, oh, that shoulder. Oh no, that's so good. Now I gotta paint shoulders, and then I have to like, I feel like I have to do a whole character sketch before I do the shoulder, so that I'm like frustrated because like I just want to get to painting. I just want to get to rendering like the shoulder and bicep really bad, because now that I've seen Sam paint it, I gotta do it for myself.
Val and I get each other for sure.
We do. Wade says buff, shirtless. Sam must be working.
It's my calling card.
All right, guys, we are going to transition over to doing the portfolio reviews. I can pull them up just for a moment, Sam, while you kind of pull it up on your screen, just in case you have to move some windows around. But we are going to be reviewing Isabel Pozo Montero today, and Olga Rusakova, I think, Rusakova. So I will. Do you
the
have?
Second one was Olga.
Was the second one? The second one could have been changed.
I got Isabel, and then
Isabel?
The second one I'm seeing something else.
All right, let me see. I'm gonna transfer over to yours real quick. Let me double check this.
Cool.
Let me see. I'm gonna message and double check real quick. But for now, we can go through. I'll leave it over on yours, and we can go through Isabel's.
Yeah, sounds good. All right, cool. Let's see here. I think like off the bat, what I'm noticing is you have a very consistent style. Like this looks like, you know, cohesive. I'm seeing someone who clearly like knows what type of work they're going to do, and I think that's important for a portfolio. Like if you're just working on learning to draw, learning to paint, you know, getting all the fundamentals down, that's one thing, and you know, when you're really developing a portfolio for work, that's another. But I think there's a lot of nice cohesive work on here. I don't know how far you definitely have a lot of work on here, which is awesome.
Yeah, tons of work.
I'm curious like how far into the future this goes. Yeah, let's see one of these first ones here. I think it should have a date, right? Most time. I don't know if the date's labeled.
Maybe at the very
Oh,
bottom. Yeah.
yeah. 2018. Okay. So not too long ago. Um, yeah, I mean, I think these are really cool. I think if you're like applying somewhere, like on a lot of portfolio sites, I think it's great to have a lot of work. Um, I think if you're developing a portfolio to send out to companies or anything like that, or have a website, having maybe not so much work but narrowing it down to your best work
Mm-hmm.
would be good, because sometimes when it's too much, it's almost overwhelming. But then at that point, you kind of open yourself up to the possibility of being judged by your weakest pieces. And
Mm-hmm.
I think there's some pieces that aren't quite as strong as some of your others. So I think a lot of times narrowing it down is really good.
I'm also looking through here and I'm seeing that sometimes, I think that it's like 100% true what you're saying is that you open yourself up to being judged by your least strongest work when you have everything crammed in there. Another thing is it also gets very overwhelming to look through your portfolio if you have so many in there. A lot of people they'll give up after a while, I think, when you have so many pieces. But if you click into some of these, um, there are projects here that literally just have one image. And so something you might do is go through your portfolio and gather all of like the single character things and then make
Hmm.
a new project that just says character illustrations and then put a collection of all of those, kind of condense it into one project. And kind of like the one that you're going through right here is having like all of these different ones in there. I think you could probably take some of your strongest single posts and combine it into a strong collection. That would be impressive.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, because I like these ones here that have all these different views of it. Some of them are crops and some of them are additional designs.
Mm-hmm.
I especially like your use of texture. I think that's kind of like a unique thing about your style that's standing out to me that I like. Like
Yeah.
especially this first one, the texture you have on this almost looks like like the illustrations on a rug. The way you did the little highlights in the curly hair here
Oh
add a
yeah.
lot of depth. Like it almost looks like a carpet with actual lighting on it, where it's catching some. It feels kind of like tactile and
Yeah,
like
it
this
feels like
is really cool.
paper and fabric and
Hmm.
all kinds of stuff and it feels warm and inviting.
Yeah, and these close-ups are nice too, to really see some of those details.
Mhm.
Um, so I really like the ones where you are pushing the texture. Let's check out this whale, because it seems like that may have some too. I really like your use
Yeah.
of texture. I feel like it's kind of to me it's one of the more eye-catching things about these, like that I'm kind of latching onto, that I really like. So I think
Mhm.
pushing that, is really cool. Kind of makes identifying your work pretty unique.
If I can offer another bit of information, I think that this is something that I see done in a lot of different portfolios and it's like in a way it's kind of a pet peeve of mine, but I also think that it can really improve a portfolio in a lot of different ways, and that is you have these project setup where you have like the initial image and then you have a bunch of close-ups of that image. But when I look at a project like that and I see that there's like tons of different shots of like the same piece, sometimes if I scroll and I see like, you know, two or three crops underneath the main one that is just of the same image, sometimes I don't scroll down below that because I just see, first of all, they're all full screened and I'm like scrolling on this never ending stream of work that I don't know when it will end, especially if there's a lot of images in there. And then sometimes you might have put like a crop or maybe another illustration way down below, but because it's all full screened and it's like a huge never ending stream, I might get tired of it or get bored of it before I get to the bottom and realize you have more content. So I always tell people, think about considering putting like your image full screen so everyone can see it, and then instead of having all of the crops also full screened, do a gallery collage, because you can do that when you make a Behance project. You don't have to make it just full screen. You can do a gallery, and then it'll have like 4 or 5 little icons underneath that you can click and expand. Like if that's something your viewer is interested in, seeing all of those crops, they can expand it and look, but it doesn't take up so much space, and then you can fit more work down below, and people are not going to become discouraged or overwhelmed by the sheer amount of scrollable images that you have in the one project. And it also, right when you show up, it gives you more of a full scope of what your project contains. So people are like, oh, okay, there's a full painting in here, there's like 6 or 7 crops that are interesting, and maybe I will actually take the time to look at all the crops, or maybe I'll just look at the ones I want to see. And that's pretty cool. I also love what you've just pulled up, Sam, which is like the process video. I think that's super useful to see how she works, and see the love and time that got put into it. That's a favorite thing of mine to see.
Yeah, and I think what I noticed about this project too was just like there were process images.
Mm-hmm.
I think this is really, really cool, really great idea. Another thing that stood out to me that I really liked was I think anytime you see a series of pieces in a portfolio, things where it's like a repeating theme and you can tell they kind of belong together, even though this one's fairly small, I think it's really unique. It's really eye-catching and memorable. This one kind of, she almost looks like she's standing up more with the background, but it looks like it's a series of people lying on the ground, and there's this really nice texture. I really like how the texture is separated from the texture of the character. It gives it some nice pop.
Yeah, it does look like a series of girls laying on the ground.
Yeah.
That's very cute, though. But I do like... I think that's something that is very popular to post on Behance, too, is like, here is a project that showcases, like a series of stuff that you can look through. The texture in this one is excellent. That really is so cool.
Yeah, the crisp edges are really cool, too. This crisp separation from the background. Really unique.
Those birds of paradise are great.
Great color contrast too. Like you got that kind of blue orange complementary color contrast going on, which is really makes the focal point of this person's head pop out, which is great. These flowers, the birds of paradise really pop out, so you get some really nice contrast. I think nice. One thing I was thinking about the others, like I like these, but I almost feel like somehow the contrast could be pushed a bit. And to me, that may be a bit of personal preference, because I do like pretty, strong contrast. And I think there is a certain like overcast, shadowed tone. But like this one, I think pops out really well and still has that kind of calm, moody color. This one, I almost somehow feel like could be separated a bit more, maybe brightened up just a bit, but I think those ones where you really do have those contrasts really do stand out to me, and I like those a lot.
Yeah. That's looking great. This is so cool.
Yeah. I think this is really great portfolio overall. Some great textures, some really cohesive style that you have going in these. So definitely. I think pushing that and really, trying to make these things look uniform, the series and everything, I think you're headed in a good direction.
Yeah, maybe just like kind of curate it down a little bit and kind of choose your strongest work, because I think that's like the hardest thing. Even for me now, like I've been utilizing a portfolio to find work for years and years, and even I still have a lot of trouble kind of like curating down and kind of purging things from my portfolio that maybe I worked really hard on and I'm very proud of, but don't necessarily showcase my current skill level. I typically try to keep like my work from the past like year or two, because depending on what I'm working on, sometimes like it's good to show that work from there, because I might not have like a huge skip in growth because I may be working on other client projects that call for me to like stay where I'm at, so I find for me personally, typically the last like year or year and a half, 2 years maybe max is where I keep my work from. But then I do have like a handful of pieces that like no matter what, like even though I did them like 4 or 5 years ago, they're still popular. And so I keep those ones, but I try not to keep every little sketch and every little project that I did for like 5 years, because that's just way too much.
it can be hard to be objective about that sometime, but
Totally. I
I
ask other
think,
people.
yeah, that's a
Yeah.
great, because you get so attached. And I think really like just it seems like you've done a lot of stuff. You've done a lot of experimenting with things. I think if you really find that direction that you're attached to, to
Hmm.
that really is your voice as an artist, and really push that and cater it down to that, I think you'll be in great shape with this. Just kind of knowing what you want from your portfolio and what direction you're trying to take it, what jobs you're trying to target, and all that stuff. But yeah, this looks good. You got a nice description. Looks like you got all your social links, which is awesome.
Hmm.
Making this Behance kind of a hub for people to find you elsewhere. So
Awesome.
yeah,
Yeah.
I think this is really solid. Just what Val and I were saying, catering it down.
And
Also,
then let's see. I think we should probably jump to the next one real quick so that we have
for
time to
sure,
review it as well. So you can go ahead and pull up Sergio. That was
Sergio. Okay,
in the doc. That will work.
cool. Also, I saw Gus was in the chat. Hey, Gus.
Yo, what's
Hey,
up?
everybody.
Hey,
If I missed anyone
hey.
in chat, hello, everyone. Appreciate y'all stopping by, hanging out with us.
I feel like you
Uh,
probably know instantly which one of these my eyes totally go to directly. I'm sure everyone
I
in chat
wonder.
knows. Yeah. I'm gonna ignore it unless you choose it. So I'm gonna keep my mouth shut. But this looks really great.
Oh, I'm sure we'll get there. Yeah, these are cool. Like off the bat, this is another one where I'm like, all right, you clearly have a visual style. Like there's kind of a unique aesthetic that you have going with this. Not only in just the colors, but like the way you use lines and blockiness. Just from the thumbnails, I think that's really solid. Like
Hmm.
someone being able to just pop open your Behance or your portfolio and see what you're about. Like I have a pretty good idea of what kind of art you like doing. What you're good at. So that's really cool. And looks like there's a nice description down here.
Yeah, I love when there is like a really nice kind of introduction about the artist there. And it doesn't look like there's too much information really
Mm-hmm.
about this person, because sometimes you go, I think like a paragraph or two is especially 2 paragraphs of information about you. I feel like that's the max. Unless you're doing something like you're listing references, or you're listing like large companies that you've worked with. Because sometimes I get to portfolios and they put like their life story in the bio section, and I'm just like, it's too much. It's too much
Yeah.
for me. But
You
gosh,
want
this
someone to
is
be
cool.
like interested at a glance and not like, that's I'm not gonna read that. It's too much, and just
Yeah,
kind
you
of,
don't want to overwhelm.
yeah. So that's good. And this is so cool. Like
Yeah.
I mean, first off, the texture you get with the lines, the way that's pretty unique to your work. Like that definitely stands out to me. But just
Oh,
like this kind of underlighting and how warm it is, that's very realistic with how that lighting would kind of look in that shadowed area. Um, the warm against the cool.
the
This is an
color
awesome
comps at
piece.
the bottom are killing me right now. Like,
Yeah.
because he goes through like the wireframing and like how it all fits together, and then he
Hmm.
did like 3 different at the very very bottom of like color, I like different color schemes, and those
Yeah, these
are
are great.
gorgeous. Like,
Yeah. The way
um,
this project is laid out is very well done, because you have this nice big finished piece. You have the description at the top, what it's about.
mhm,
Um, and that's something I really like when people kind of on these projects, because a lot of times when you're seeing someone's portfolio for the first time, you don't know who they are or what they're about. So getting a little snippet of info kind of adds context, and you have this big um, intro image. You got some of these kind of sketches, and then
mhm.
you got, you know, you can kind of see where the effects were added and where the punch of color were, and then of course the color comps. It's like breaking down every element of the illustration, which is great.
Yeah, and this is kind of what I was talking about with our previous portfolio that we looked at, in that you see how, yeah, they have like the big image here where I can look and be like, oh wow, this is really cool. I can click on it, and just take in the full image. And then there are different pieces that one can look through and see, but I can scroll past and just be like, oh cool, there's like some sketches, and there's like the the basic shapes and stuff of this, but if I don't want to look at all those, I can just scroll past them and then I can go into the color comps. I can see the whole breadth of the project without being overwhelmed and having to scroll through a full size of each and every one of those tiny pieces. Which is it's easier to appreciate and take in the project as a whole without being bombarded with information and not knowing when that project is going to end because I'm scrolling for a long time.
Yeah, and I think the way that you distribute the different images, it's not just kind of the same picture with slightly different crops. It's like finished piece, complete like wireframe line drawing, the basic block out of all the shapes, the effects and texture added on, and then color comp. So it's all very, like, it keeps my attention throughout because I know each image I scroll past, there's going to be something completely new, like to see a new part of the process. So I think this is structured very well. And these pieces are super impressive. Like, you have a very unique style, very recognizable style. I'm sure if I saw your work elsewhere, I'd be like, oh, it's Sergio's work.
Yeah, definitely.
I'm digging this style for sure.
Yeah, 100%.
And then
oh yeah, it's the boy.
Yeah,
this is killing me. Oh no.
I love your lighting. The lighting in all of these is so unique, but it's done in such like a graphic, vectory way. Like, I feel like I haven't seen much of this. It's a very unique combination of elements that I'm really liking.
Oh my gosh, there's more.
Ooh.
Oh no. I'm gonna let you take this one because I will waste our time.
I love how you've transitioned. I mean, just seeing the first two pieces and your thumbnails, my brain goes to like, oh, structural, landscapes, architecture. But it's cool to see that style translated so successfully into character design.
Oh man.
Like you clearly have your fundamentals down, the aesthetic you're going for, and you know how to, adapt it to different subject matters. So this is really nice. Them together.
Yes. I like that they have, like, he has two of them where he put the pairs together. But if you notice, if you look at them, they're not necessarily in the exact same pose they were in the singular, like, solo portraits, which I think is cool, because then it's not just like you're giving me information that I've already seen. There are like subtle differences in the pose, like because the Mandalorian has his arm up while he's holding Baby Yoda, and I call it the nanny droid. The nanny droid has like his weapon up and is doing his thing, so it's like it's very cool.
Yeah, and this is just a super successful instance of, I feel like illustration almost meets sort of graphic design type of feel.
Oh yeah.
It's like graphic posters, but obviously illustrated. And I mean, I feel almost a little bad. I don't have any like critiques so far. I just feel like these are a very exemplary example of, someone finding a style and really honing in on it and executing on it very successfully. So
yeah, totally.
So far, I think this is a killer portfolio.
I think that we are coming to the end of our time here that we have to spend on portfolio reviews. So definitely give our two portfolios a follow. If we can, I think some of our folks are in chat. You guys can click on Sergio and give him a follow. And you can also give Isabel Montero a follow. Congratulate them on their awesome work. And then we do have maybe 3 minutes left of our stream, so maybe I can toggle back, or you can kind of pull up your art again, Sam, and we can do a little recap of what you worked on, and then before we take off, we can let everybody know where they can find you on social media, and all that good stuff, because I know some people might have jumped in during the portfolio reviews and will want to get that information from you. So
for sure. Yeah, great job on the portfolio, everyone. Those are awesome.
Yeah, very well done.
So sorry, were you saying like basically a recap, or work in a little bit and then recap?
I think we only have time really for a recap at the moment, so just I would say like a minute or so to recap it, and then we can kind of go over your social media and let everybody know where they can find you on Instagram and Twitter and all that stuff.
Gotcha, perfect. So what we did today, was basically talking about character design with an emphasis on simplification. Today was mainly focused on drawing, how I think about the line drawing and the sketching phase, with an emphasis on simplifying the shapes, simplifying the forms. Tomorrow, we're going to be going more over doing the same thing, but with value, with color, with painting. So there's drawing and there's painting. It's two different phases for me. You have
Mm-hmm.
a strong drawing, you can have a strong painting. So today was drawing, and I'll take this painting off, just put the sketches up.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what we focused on, just simplify these basic cylinders, basic box shapes, all that good stuff. And then we touched a little bit on, painting, how I use clipping masks and all that, the brushes I use, and that will kind of set the stage for what we're going to be doing tomorrow, where we'll take these sketches we did and paint them out a little bit.
Awesome.
And
And
if you,
where? Oh, sorry. Go ahead. We
oh,
got like a minute left though, and I definitely want to make sure we get to where
all
people
right.
can find you. So I'm sorry to
Yeah.
cut you off and rush you a little bit, but
No, right on time. That's where we're at. So if you do want to keep up with me, I'm Sam Peterson Art everywhere online. You can follow me here on Behance. I've been streaming lately from my Behance channel as well, doing a world building project, which I showed a little bit earlier with these characters. So if you want to see more of that, definitely keep an eye on my social medias. Instagram and Twitter are great ways to keep up with me, and of course here on Behance as well. I also stream on Twitch 4 to 5 days a week.
awesome. And you have a YouTube channel too, where you've got a few videos that I thought were really cool. So I pulled that up real quick.
Oh,
He's Sam
thanks.
Peterson Art across the board. So Sam Peterson Art on YouTube, at Sam Peterson Art on Twitter, and Sam Peterson Art on Instagram. So definitely give him a
Mhm.
follow. His Behance link is below the video player on the behance.net/live page where most of you are chatting. So thank you folks so much. And thank you, Sam, for joining us. It's been a blast, but we got to take off. So we will see you folks tomorrow. Adios,
Thanks,
everyone.
everybody. Bye.